The new Spider-Man movie should be called Spider-Man, brought to you by Palantir Flock cameras and the Amazon Ring video doorbell. Spoiler alert. The entire premise of the film is that Spider-Man uses the surveillance state to catch the antagonist of the movie. Without spoiling too much, he essentially sets up an array of video camera software all around the city to catch the villain, much to the delight of everyone else. At least in The Dark Knight Rises, Morgan Freeman is looking at the surveillance state Batman sets up and he's like, this is wrong. Morgan Freeman comes out against wiretapping. Not in this movie. It's pathetic, and it's widely known that the U.S. military either provides direct financial assistance to Marvel and DC movies, or they will just loan them military equipment for free. Because they are making propaganda. They're making pro-military, pro-cop propaganda. If you watch the movie, Peter Parker's best friend is a cop. It's just so transparent. And also, oh my God, Tom Holland and Zendaya, how much money do you need? You guys probably cumulatively already have $500,000. You're in all the biggest movies. Do you really have to take scripts that laud the surveillance state, that bring us ever closer to a general consensus that being spied on by the likes of Alex Karp and Peter Thiel is good? This is the slop that we are fed. God damn. I don't get it. I know when you see Spider-Man, you're like, oh, we are so far from revolution because this is the shit that people willingly watch, not question. Spider-Man Brand New Day, brought to you by Palantir.
You want to help? The best thing you could do is find Scorpion. He's our only lead.
Yeah, I know. I have every camera in the city running a facial recognition scan for him.
That sounds super illegal, Spider-Man. I'm gonna pretend I didn't hear that.
Yeah, probably for the best.
This looks like a drone. We don't spy on people, Genki.
I convinced the World Security Council we needed a quantum surge in threat analysis. For once, we're way ahead of the curve.
By holding a gun to everyone on Earth and calling it protection.
You know, I read those SSR files. Greatest Generation? You guys did some nasty stuff.
Yeah. We compromised. Sometimes in ways that made us not sleep so well. But we did it so that people could be free. This isn't freedom. This is fear.
S.H.I.E.L.D. takes the world as it is, not as we'd like it to be. It's getting damn near past time for you to get with that program, Cap.
Don't hold your breath.
I'm gonna use this one time to track down the Joker, and then Lucius Fox, you have to destroy it because it's so unethical.
I have Palantir in my bedroom. Whoa, whoopsie, guess that's illegal.
Corruption is not bad. Corruption is only bad if I'm not involved.
Yes.
But if I'm part of that corruption, I'll defend it.
2008, when Batman was using mass surveillance in a movie that was at least conscious of the moral implications of that technology while fully justifying it in response to 9/11 and the War on Terror and the Patriot Act, it was identified as techno-fascism. 2026, you have Peter Parker doing something very similar in a movie that doesn't grapple with it at all, but rather treats it as a throwaway joke in service of the government and with the police looking the other way. It's fair to ask, is the mass surveillance okay when it's smiling and not frowning? In my review, I really like what Tom Holland's doing performance-wise, but the writing of this Peter Parker feels a bit like Bruce Wayne or Tony Stark. Thing is, we got an entire Spider-Man movie that gave Peter Parker not just a weapon with drones and all that, but a mass surveillance tool in Edith. This movie was very carefully to not critique that too hard and to play a lot of it off as a joke. Thing is, at the end of that movie, despite all the horrible stuff we saw, Peter Parker was still wearing those glasses around his neck. They got taken away from him at the beginning of No Way Home. In an era where there's an attempt to normalize meta glasses and the like, I think the messaging of this movie was very curious. I think the messaging of this film was very similar in a way to The Dark Knight. Dark Knight, through Lucius, actually offers a stronger condemnation of this technology, but it says that Batman is the one person, right, who is moral and just enough to use this, only go after the terrorists, and then get rid of the technology when it's done. Peter keeping those glasses at the end of the film, it's seemingly just saying he needs to be mature enough, right, but he is the right person once he reaches that maturity. Technology can be bad in the wrong hands, but in the right hands, it's okay. Dark Knight is 100% reactionary to 9/11, and it 100% justifies the use of the technology in the end because it says there there was no other way. The Dark Knight had better writing where they try to make it more challenging for the audience because they say civilians are going to die if this is not done. Brand New Day, Peter's on the phone with a New York City detective talking about protecting a government agency in damage control. Trying to find Scorpion because he's their only lead, and Peter says, I have every camera in the city running facial recognition. The detective says, that sounds super illegal, I'll pretend I didn't hear that, and Peter says, yeah, I guess that's for the best, but hey, when he shows his face, we'll be able to find him. Like that being super illegal and unethical, it's okay, right? Because it's your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. He's nothing like the big angry techno-fascist Batman, right? This AI surveillance, facial recognition bullshit being pushed into movies like this that are very popular, in my opinion, help to normalize stuff like Flock. Those cameras are not just being used for tracking cars and license plates, they can be used to track people as well. Implications here are horrifying, and there are many other concerns, for example, Ring cameras and how they can be tapped into by the police or the government. The idea they try to push is that this technology is okay and normal when the good guys have it. You think back to 9/11 and the Patriot Act and you ask yourself, what have the good guys been doing for the past 25 years? When you dig into things like the Patriot Act and the government's response to 9/11, you find people like Ghislaine Maxwell's sisters, Christine and Isabel. We know that Robert Maxwell was a spy, we know that Ghislaine was Ghislaine, but nobody ever talks about the other two sisters. Christine and Isabel co-founded one of the first search engines that ever existed in Magellan. The next thing that Christine did was found a company called Chiliad, quote, a software company involved in the advance of on-demand, massively scalable, intelligent mining of structured and unstructured data through the use of natural language search technologies. The FBI turned around and built their counterterrorism data warehouse around her tech. At the end of the day, the Maxwell family history is far more interesting than Jeffrey himself, and this is just a small example of how the United States government in the early 2000s told you you had to be afraid there was an enemy out there and they needed to abuse your privacy to keep you safe. We still prop these ideas up with our superheroes, whether they're cold and angry or happy, young, and cheerful.
I find it so fascinating that one of the most controversial moments in Spider-Man Brand New Day probably wouldn't have been seen as controversial even a few years ago. I'm of course referring to the scene where Peter Parker admits to having created an entire surveillance network that stretches across New York City to help him watch crime. And the reason I think that moment in particular is under so much scrutiny is because, at least in the United States, we have become far more aware of how much we are truly being watched. To the point that wide-scale surveillance no longer feels like some abstract idea or some sci-fi concept. It is reality. And so I think it's become harder for audiences to accept that someone would use this power for good. And it's made a lot of people question why Brand New Day would include this story element. But when you step back and think about it, so many superhero stories are about characters who rely on surveillance. Think about the character of Batman, for instance. He is constantly surveilling Gotham City. It's also baked into the Spider-Man video games. Spider-Man has an app on his phone that alerts him to where different crimes are in the city. Tony Stark created Ultron, and the list goes on and on and on and on. Anyway, what are your thoughts on this element of Brand New Day? Is the film pro-surveillance propaganda, or is it merely trying to adapt its source material?
I was just talking about the new Spider-Man movie with a friend. I just saw it yesterday, by the way. And in the conversation, they were like, it felt like a propaganda film. Funny timing. And in that moment, I was like, oh, yeah, you know what? It's also kind of like an incel film. Because it's like this man is in his 20s, he's self-isolating or whatever and telling himself like these people that once knew me or who I could get close to would never understand me, and so I have to isolate myself, which is typical of a lot of superhero movies. But in this case, his loneliness is creating like this blackout rage where he becomes this monster and he's struggling with this. It's a very empathetic view to that kind of experience. And then on top of the fact that he's spending all his time with this law-skirting, gun-toting individual who's just like obsessed with firearms and violence and not handling their internal turmoils effectively. It's like the whole thing is marketed to a very specific demographic of person. And then on top of that, the main villain has like consent issues. There's even that scene where the villain, who I won't say the name of, is trying to jump into Spider-Man. And they're like, for some reason, I can't jump into you. And he's like, yeah, I'm sure that's very frustrating to you. That was kind of a statement. So yeah, anyway. Moreover, there's a scene in the movie where he kisses somebody, without spoiling things, who isn't themselves at that point. And later in the movie, he comes clean and he's like, hey, I just wanted to let you know that like when I didn't realize you weren't yourself, I kissed you. And she was like, thank you for telling. I think consent was actually like a core concept of the movie. But you got to ask yourself, like, what is the message we're supposed to be taking away from this movie when you have all these themes of consent and loneliness and rage being thrown around? But then at the same time, Spider-Man is making use of this technology, which, as many people have pointed out, is not really being questioned by anyone in the movie. So it's like you're bringing up these topics, but for what? To say what?
Streets are calling him Palantir Parker, which is absolutely diabolical, but also kind of deserved. Obviously, spoiler warnings ahead for Spider-Man Brand New Day, but I wanted to talk about some of Peter's inventions in this movie, the implication of them, and also what I think this movie is trying to say about technology. So there's obviously been a lot of conversation about Peter Parker using like facial recognition tracking to try and track down a villain within the movie, and I think it's mostly brought on because of real-world frustrations. Like, don't get me wrong, I hate flock cameras and AI more than anybody, but I don't know that they're necessarily trying to endorse Palantir when, you know, they have Spider-Man out of that line, but rather they just thought it was an easy and simple way to kind of just tick the plot forward. But like, hey, Marvel's taken money from the DoD before, so like, could have been paid to put that line in there. I'm not writing it off. But the reason I don't believe it's like an endorsement is because of the larger conversation that this movie is having around technology, specifically about the inhibitor chips that Peter Parker invented. Because those who may not be like familiar with the larger landscape of Marvel, that inhibitor chip is going to be used to make inhibitor collars, right? Which is, you know, largely a part of X-Men lore. We see them used on mutants all the time to depower them, to capture them, and in some like dystopian futures like the one Lucas Bishop comes from, to enslave them. And I think that's why when we see Peter Parker bring up the idea of a universal inhibitor, we see Bruce being very standoffish about it, and that's a lot of the reason that Bruce's role in this movie is so important, because he immediately thinks about the negatives, about the downsides of what that could mean. And, you know, he has seen firsthand how, you know, in the name of scientific research, of moving things forward, he has turned himself into a gamma irradiated monster, and also saw Tony Stark create Ultron. To me, what Bruce is trying to say in this movie and the messaging around it in general is just because you can make something doesn't mean that you should. And so when you look at it through that lens, I think, you know, Peter's use of, you know, facial recognition tracking and, you know, basically making New York a surveillance state, or even his use of AI, which is something that has always been synonymous with like tech-savvy superheroes in comics and, you know, in movies with the MCU, Jarvis and whatnot. Using that technology, right, you know, that's analogous to real-world things and real-world conversations like flock cameras and AI, you know, kind of feeds into, I think, the larger theming of the movie, that, you know, just because those things were made, could have been invented, doesn't mean that they should have been. And I think it's just crazy to me to think about, like, the future of the MCU if all of this remains one continuity, when the X-Men eventually arrive and those inhibitor collars eventually, inevitably, become a huge part of their stories, they'll always have been invented by Peter Parker, by Spider-Man. Just because it was useful for him at that exact point in time, he didn't think about the future ramifications of it, or what it could be, or what it could turn into. Just because he could have made it doesn't mean he should.
I don't know if people just missed it or they're just not talking about it, but Spider-Man was pro-surveillance in Spider-Man Brand New Day. Like, there was a whole scene where he was talking to Detective DeWolf, and she was like, how are you going to find Jean Grey? She could be anywhere. And he's like, oh, don't worry, I have cameras all over the city running facial recognition. This motherfucker just described flock cameras. And it wasn't even like a Dark Knight situation where he immediately faced pushback and later faced repercussions, because Detective DeWolf basically threw her hands up and was like, oh, I didn't hear anything. And then later on in the movie, it's never brought up again. And so it really just made me wonder why they just had to put this inconsequential pro-surveillance scene in one of the biggest movies of 2026 during a time when nobody wants to be surveilled. Until I remembered that Disney actually already uses facial recognition technology at their resorts and parks, so they have an incentive to normalize the use of this technology. The same way that they have an incentive to normalize the use of AI. Like, before this movie came out, I remember people were upset that Spider-Man was going to have an AI assistant, and now that the movie's come out, I kind of have to agree. What was the point? It wasn't to show that he is just smart, because they did that in other ways in this movie. Like when he was talking to Ned about his web shooters and how complicated it was to make that, plus the fluid. Now, I don't say any of this to discourage anyone from liking this movie or shame anyone for liking this movie. I still give it a 9 out of 10. I really enjoyed this movie. But when you are a fan of something, I do believe that you have the responsibility to critique it, and a couple of things in this movie just reminded me that this is a corporate product, unfortunately.
This is a flock camera, one of about 100,000 installed across the United States to watch over you and keep you safe. But there are criminals among us who believe that these violate their privacy and human rights. These hooligans are going out and purchasing battery-operated reciprocating saws like this one, and 6-inch Diablo steel demon blades, knowing it's more efficient and quieter than angle grinders. They go out dressed in non-identifying disposable clothing, including work gloves and full face coverage so as cameras to not display the color of their skin, their eyes, their hair color, or their tattoos. Of course, these people are careful, so they make purchases in cash and keep no receipts. In preparation of their illicit activities, these vile individuals use dflock.org to pick a target and plan a route that avoids camera detection. With all phones, smartwatches, and geolocating devices left at home, these villains know if they're not caught in the act, they'll get away scot-free. I've set up a demonstration on my private property to show you just how efficient the lunatics have become. With their saw wrapped in a trash bag, they approach from behind the camera's line of sight and tear right through this black aluminum alloy post. Hopefully Flock has secured the cameras a little better so they don't get a personal injury lawsuit. Once these degenerates have destroyed the post, they go for the camera too, even the solar panel. They're thorough in their destruction to ensure maximum monetary loss, and they always leave the remnants behind as a visceral message to all. After this, the cold-hearted anarchist makes their predetermined getaway, casually yet swift. By adhering to this specific set of principles, this wild subculture of flock hunters ensures that their MO is always the same. The modus operandi never changes. That way, if one of their members is picked up by law enforcement, they will face one charge of vandalism, but tying them to any previous or subsequent acts of destruction will be nearly impossible for the prosecutor. Some say flock hunters are domestic terrorists, others true patriots protecting our rights, our freedom, and our future. As for me, well, I'm just an unbiased, independent journalist. It's 100 degrees here in Tucson and the perfect time to unveil my new workout. Sweat therapy has many benefits, so I've covered myself head to toe. And I've restricted my airflow to improve my respiratory function. I've even brought my new Porto band as a jogging weight so I get an arm workout too. But since it's so sunny outside, I've wrapped it in black plastic so the paint doesn't fade. And I've brought my action cam to give you a beautiful tour of the U of A campus. So let's go for a run. Gotta get the arms going here. Let me get a closer look at this brick. They did such a wonderful job. This must be their parking garage. So big. I wonder what that building is. I bet they have great food. Oh, hello. Hi. Let's hear some jams. How you doing? You wanna play something?
Oh, I don't know, bro.
That's all right. I love you, man. Thank you. I love you too. Never had such a great workout. Oh my God, this stone gate is amazing. I love the way they did this. Oh my God. Would you look at that saguaro? This is the longest light ever. You always gotta wait for the signal to turn green. I can't believe how many jaywalkers there are in this country. Maybe this will help. Yeah! Another parking complex. They must have a lot of students that go here. Oh, something caught my eye over there. Is that a Panera catering truck? I love Panera. They should sponsor this video. Oh, I do wonder what this will be. A frat house, perhaps? An emergency button. I'm so glad U of A takes safety so seriously. If only they would upgrade the system to track our every movement, then we would be super safe. Oh, that's so genius. It's a security camera to watch the emergency button in case they can't reach. Absolutely incredible workout today. I don't know about you guys, but I would love to see the new Axon Flock fitness plan catch on like wildfire. I want to see people out in the streets staying active like the days of Pokemon Go. Reciprocating saws and Porto bands in every hand, building biceps fully covered so they get that sweet, sweet sweat therapy. A brand new healthy hobby for all of us law-abiding citizens.
Every American should watch this.
Do you have plans to continue to take down these flock cameras?
Absolutely. No, absolutely. They are a clear and present threat to public safety.
He destroyed 3 flock cameras.
Oh, guy in an American flag shirt quoting the Constitution. He must be a dangerous radical. Better kill that guy. He knows his rights. That's not acceptable. There are dozens, maybe hundreds of similar videos of people destroying license plate readers, cutting down the poles, running into them in their cars, spray painting them. We're not endorsing that, of course. It's not drug-addicted kids knocking down flock cameras for fun. It's sober, decent, patriotic Americans who believe the promises of their country. They're mad not because they're trying to get something from Flock, but because they want to be left alone by Flock. Because Flock was not part of the country they signed up for. No one asked their permission to steal their images and to spy on their conversations, to read their license plates. They don't think it's to make them safer. They understand that it's to strip them of their most basic humanity, which it is.